Hi again. So I found the chapter. It's actually Job 29. Okay, so let's read it together. Job 29. And Job again took up his parable and said, Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shined upon my head, and by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the rightness of my days, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, and my children were about me, when my steps were washed with butter, and the rocks poured me out streams of oil, when I went forth to the city to the gate unto the city, when I prepared my seat in the street. And the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the aged rose up and stood. The princes refrained from talking, and laid their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles were hushed, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. For when the ear heard me, then it blessed me. And when the eye saw me, it gave witness unto me, because I delivered the poor that cried, the fatherless also that had none to help him. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was as a robe and a diadem. I was eyes to the blind, and feet was I to the lame. I was father to the needy, and the cause of him that I knew not I searched out. And I brake the jaws of the unrighteous, and plucked the prey out of his teeth. Then I said, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root is spread out to the waters, and the dew lieth all night upon my branch. My glory is fresh in me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. Unto me men gave ear, and waited, and kept silence for my counsel. After my words they spake not again, and my speech distilled upon them. And they waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain. I smiled on them when they had no confidence, and the light of my countenance they cast not down. I chose out their way, and sat as chief, and dwelt as a king in the army, as one that comforteth the mourners. Wasn't that like awesome? Like, can you imagine a man like that? Right? That's like, ah. So it said that he was not idle. Can you tell that he was not idle? Like, he did everything that he knew how to have God smile upon him. Like, you can understand now why God called him honorable, right? Why he said he was perfect, right? All these wonderful characteristics, attributes. That right there is a man, right? Girls, if we could only find a man like that these days, right? Right. Anyway, so if we could but try to emulate some of the things that he's talking about, like being someone there who can rescue those who are needy, speak words of wisdom so that other people can actually heed our advice, fight for justice or fight against injustice, right? Be a father to those who need help, help widows. Like, there's so many things he was doing, right? And so by the time he became older, he was just like so renowned and so loved, so favored by man and by God, right? So let's go back to the lesson. So that there proved to us that indeed Job was not, like, he was a busy man, right? He wasn't given, okay, so, but even though he did all these things, right, it also said that he wasn't warned as to when his trial was, to come. But he was constantly ready. You can tell, right? He was, doing the right thing all the time. So when the trial came, he was living a life of righteousness. So that's why he was prepared and able to say, God giveth, God take away, let his name be praised. Also, if you saw my previous video, you realize that even though we can't pinpoint when we will receive trials and tribulations, when we will go through difficult times, I said one of the gauges I have is if I do great things for people, I can expect some trial and tribulation to come afterwards. It doesn't always happen like I do one thing, I get a trial, I do another thing, I do a trial. But you know that the devil will be after you if you're doing good for people. So obviously, sanitation, cleaning the streets. So obviously Job was doing a lot of good things. So eventually the devil was going to come after him, right? It says, friends gave him sincere yet misguided counsel, but even in his complete loss, Job remained true to God. He had no idea that great blessings would follow. He simply remained true to the one goal that really mattered to him, seeing his creator and redeemer. So a lot of times, we don't do things because of the consequence of whatever, we do would bring. And that's not always the reason why you shouldn't do something wrong, right? So Job did not know that, if he remained faithful to God, that he was going to get all his wonderful gifts back. He was not aware of that, but he stayed steadfast because he loved God. And that should be one of the reasons why we do right. Not because we don't want to go to hell, not even because we want to go to heaven, we want to get rewards. We should do what's right because it is right, because we love God, because we want to please our maker. We want to make him happy, right? When you love your husband and you love your friend and you love your parents, right? You're not kind to them because they had done something for you, right? You're kind to them and you love them and you do great things to them because you just love them. You want to see them happy. You want to see them content. You want them to realize, or you want to prove to them how much you love them. And that's one of the reasons why we Christians should do what's right. Not because God is going to reward us, not because we're going to heaven, not because we're not going to hell, but because we just love God and we want to make him happy. We want to prove to him how much he means to us. What happened to Job seems like unfair punishment when we look at it from earthly standards. This righteous man suffered tremendous loss, not only in wealth, but in his family as well. Even his friends, who should have supported him, offered opinions about why what happened was his fault. They advised him to give up on God and die. However, through it all, Job looked for ways to better serve God, and he listened when God spoke. God rewarded him greatly. So we saw yesterday that it's very important to choose your company wisely, because sometimes they will lead you in a path that is not great. In the same way as Job, if he had listened to his friend, he had listened to his wife, he would never reap the consequence or the rewards afterwards. He would have indeed cursed God and he might have died, right? So we have to be very careful whose advice we listen to, and be cautious that we're not listening to bad advice, poor counsel. And you can usually tell when someone's giving you poor counsel, it's not according to God's will. It doesn't go according to what you read in the Bible. But obviously, for you to know if it doesn't go according to God's will, or if it's not according to God's word in the Bible, you'd have to be reading your Bible, right? You have to have a connection with God so that he can inspire your heart and your mind, don't listen to this or don't do that. And sometimes, you might have a friend who tells you something to do something wrong, and you might not necessarily tell the friend, that's not godly, like I'm not gonna do that, right? But then you just, sidestep it and like, okay, you listen, but you never actually do it. Obviously, it is wiser that you just remove yourself from the company, but we're not all as strong, right? And sometimes we're in people's lives to show them, a better way also. Yes, they want to influence us, but we have to work in a way where we can influence them. Obviously, if we can't, then we have to skedaddle, like get out of that relationship, get out of that friendship, because it's easier for you to go down than for you to bring someone up, right? So Not everyone is as it seems here on earth. Countless beings are watching the character of God play out in the lives of Christians. We are fortunate enough to be witnesses to his power, majesty, and love to all people, including our friends, loved ones, and co-workers. So that's what I just said. But I like that first part when it says, not everyone is as it seems here on earth. There are some people in your life who are acting like they're your friend, that they have great counsel to give you, that they are in your best interest, where really they're not. And you won't know it until they do something wrong, because especially if you have a good heart, you're always going to think the best of people. Like, that's the problem with me. Like, I always want to believe that people have good in them. Like, they don't really mean to do wrong. And I'm always like, excusing people's actions. Like, she did this because of this, and probably it's because of that, and probably she didn't mean it. Because if I can excuse it, then I can forgive you. Obviously, once I can't excuse it, then, well, we have a problem. I'm gone, right? But it's like, I find that people, especially when you're trying to be good, they do their best to make you fall, because they can't fathom that you would be this good, that you would really try this hard to please God. So they're always trying to put traps in front of you to see if you will fall, right? So they try this one, you didn't fall. They'll try something else, you didn't fall. They'll try something, and it's like, it's a constant. And once you realize this person is setting traps for you, you have to leave them. You have to stay away from that person, because you're not, the text says, be careful that you don't think you're standing lest you fall, that kind of thing, where that's pride. If you're like, oh, they can't get me, I'm strong, you do not know how strong you are until you have fallen, and you're like, oh gosh, I wasn't that strong after all, right? So you never should test yourself, test your strength, test your capability, right? Because you don't want to fall, right? Don't be the company of a person whom you think is an evil influence because you think you can withstand it, or you like them that much. You should try your best to stay away from that kind of company. Obviously, you can't change a person, right? You should try to, prove to them how good God is in your life, so that maybe they can change and they could stop setting traps for you, and stop wanting evil for you. Because then when they realize, how loving you are to them, how good you are to them despite of their evil ways, maybe they'll have a realization like, oh my gosh, maybe I really should stop trying to attack this person, right? But then if that doesn't happen, really, you should not be putting yourself in a situation where, someone is setting you up for failure, right? Because you don't know people. People's heart are deceitful. You're deceitful. You don't even know yourself half the time. So how are you going to know someone else? And a lot of times we do know people, or we have an inclination, we have an idea, but we long so much for company, we long so much for attention, for love, for connection with the human, just with other people, right? We want to be sociable, that we try to ignore what we sense, what we feel, right? And God will protect you for a time, but if you insist, you will fall, and then it's going to be your own fault, and then you're going to wonder, why you can't go back to God to ask him for forgiveness, because of that guilt that you're going to feel. It's your own fault. I let this happen to me. Do you know how many, girls who were either raped or hurt or deceived in one way or the other, duped, and they feel, so guilty. And obviously that happens to guys also with friends, right? And then they realize, like, how did I miss this? And they're like, wait, no, I did miss this. I ignored it, right? And then you're like, it's in so much trouble, but it's too late. I was watching a movie once about two friends, and like, they were like this, right? And obviously one was jealous of the other, and he set him up. And the way that he did it, like, he got his, the guy ended up in jail. He took his wife. He took possession of all of his wealth. It was just so horrible. And then by the time this man realized it, the others laughing in his face behind bars, and he's like, how could you do this to me? But by that time it was too late, right? So you have to be very wary of friends, people you call friends. So one of the reasons why I don't have friends is for that reason. I tend to have I'm so precautionary. Someone called me paranoid, and there's a bit of paranoia in that. But I'd rather be paranoid and safe than open and in danger, but it's really, there's a balance. Obviously, you can't be like, oh my gosh, she's gonna hurt me, oh my gosh, being wary of everything people say and do. It's like